We'll open the meeting with public comment on any subject not on the agenda. Is there any public comment?
I do. Go to the podium. Good morning. My name is Debbie Randolph. Earlier this week at the commission meeting, Commissioner Obert said, and I quote, "We serve 6,000 people in this county, and not all of them are on Facebook. Not all of them are able to come to this meeting because they are working. There's an awful lot of them, pretty loud, one-on-one, that are not making their voices heard. We serve them as well," unquote. I agree completely with Commissioner Obert. She went on to say that many people have told her, one-on-one, that they didn't support paying the $500 claim by Sheriff Meehan for the photos. If Commissioner Obert's statement is true, then I urge you to adjust your meeting schedule to allow comments to be heard publicly. It is the obligation of the entire commission to hear these views. If the commission truly wants to be transparent, I suggest you consider evening meetings, not even just one per month, not an extra meeting. Nobody wants to go to more meetings, but in place of one of your daytime meetings. Furthermore, it is not fair for the commission to diminish the value of comments made by those of us who are able to attend the meetings with the excuse that other people can't come to the meetings, especially when the commission has the power to adjust meeting times to be more inclusive to the entire county. For those of us who are able to make daytime meetings, I remind you that our opinions have value and we care. If Commissioner Obert's statement is true, that people have expressed views to her personally, it is the obligation of the entire commission to hear those views. As Commissioner Obert said, the commission represents 6,000 people, not just those who are able to attend meetings. Changing the meeting times to accommodate those people would be a great step in the right direction in providing transparency to everyone in the county. I hope you will consider this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes.
So I might be breaking the rules a little bit, Jody Moore again, but I wanted to speak about law enforcement, and I know that the agenda today is about the TED, but one of the things I wanted to speak to separately is in regard to when I came and spoke to you all after Mason was killed, and this is directed to Commissioner Obert and Commissioner Delger. Do you remember when I spoke to you and asked you about prioritizing law enforcement?
Yeah.
Do you remember what you told me in that meeting when I asked you if you would commit to that? Do you remember what you said?
That we would fund law enforcement as much as we possibly can.
That you would commit to prioritizing law enforcement?
Yes.
Commissioner Obert, do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. So do you feel like you've done that?
To the extent of our financial ability, yes.
So one of the questions that I have is with regard to the increased growth in the southern end of the county, and what you will be discussing in a minute is how do you feel that we're going to be able to take care of those people with emergency services, law enforcement. How do you feel like we're going to be able to take care of those people to protect them, not only those people, but also our law enforcement and our first responders that work in those areas? How do you feel like we're going to be able to do that with increased growth with the way that you're currently funding law enforcement?
We have applied for several grants through the DES to build a facility down there with land that the people who were doing the development have basically set aside for us. We're hoping we have a team from MSU Architecture working on a building plan. We are working through, I believe it's a USDA grant for a facility to house ambulance, fire, and law enforcement down there. We'll also have facilities for the officers who are on duty. We'll have an office for them and some like temporary living quarters. So through a shift, they have a place to kind of go to.
So you have facilities, or you're working on facilities through grants, but you don't have people. So you also need to consider funding the people. So
Yes.
what are your thoughts with that?
Well, we are in discussions with possibly hopefully getting a public safety mill levy passed. If we can take that to the voters and get that passed, and it's, there's two options there. We can do a countywide mill levy, or we could actually set up a, public safety district down there that would mean that those individuals in that part of the county would pay more into a public safety, district, would still be underneath control of the sheriff, but those taxes paid in that district would go strictly to law enforcement within that district. So an officer that we funded there would be primarily assigned to that area as the officer is that we have right now, but we would, hopefully, if we could get that passed, the district or the state or the county-wide, then we could put another officer in that area.
So currently, though, the finances that are going to the law enforcement, would that money change then when a mill levy comes, or will they still continue to get that amount of money?
The mills, or I'll try to explain this the best I can. The mills would stay where they're at right now, with the exception of if the state, like this last year, the state cut like 3 mills, which amounted, I think, to like 1.8% or something. So everybody's budget the mills got cut by that much, but the value of the mill actually amounted to, I think, a $37,000 increase. So it depends on what the state does with our mills, because the state will cut mills or add mills depending on our growth. So if they're cut mills, then every department that gets mills gets a proportional cut as to the amount that we got cut. But because you cut mills doesn't necessarily mean you cut financial funding,
Sure,
because the
and
value of the mills goes up.
Sure, and I understand that you have to allot money to the departments that you are responsible for based on what the state gives you with regard to mills. I understand that.
Yes.
But what I'm asking is that going to change if a public safety mill levy passes? Is that going to change what you three then determine comes down from the state and is given to law enforcement? Because is that going to, basically what I'm asking is, are you going to then take the funds that you're currently giving to law enforcement, or are you going to then decrease those funds because of public safety mill levy passed?
No, if the public votes for, say, a 10 mil increase for public safety, we're not gonna go back and cut 10 mills out and spread it out among the general fund. We would still maintain all the mills that we have in public safety right now, but they would get the additional 10 mills. And the additional 10 mills, if the public passed that, are only allowed to go to public safety.
So another question I had is, you said that you all had applied for a grant
Yes.
for the facilities out there. Who actually applied for that grant? Did the county apply for that?
Mr. Conkey did, through the DES services.
So Mr. Conkey applied for that, or MBAC applied for that grant?
Mr. Conkey did, I believe. I believe it was through MBAC. This MBAC kind of told us about the grant, but I believe Mr. Conkey applied for that.
But we signed it, so it's actually a commission grant.
So the commission signed it, but Mr. Conkey was kind of the guy that's running the grant.
So is that grant, though, facilitated through MBAC?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So one of the other questions I had, and I just wanted to, I know this is in regard to what's on the agenda, but my concern for the TED is how that's going to impact law enforcement and public safety and first responders. And so I just want to make sure that I again reiterate to you all that I feel that law enforcement and public safety needs to be a priority with you three. And from my perspective, I don't feel like it is. So that's the end of my statement. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, so we will close the commissioners' meeting and open the public hearing. Intent to adopt a resolution to create the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning District and Regulation. The resolution of intent to create the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning District and adopt the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning Regulation with map. Whereas the 2003 Broadwater County Growth Policy Plan, the growth policy, was duly adopted by the Broadwater County Commission, the Commission, pursuant to 761601 MCA, and whereas the Commission has concerns that the inability to address infrastructure deficiencies in the industrial commercial area of an Wheatland Consensus Designated Place, the CDP, has stymied the location, growth, and retention of secondary value-adding industries, and whereas Broadwater County has decided to embark on the process to create a targeted economic development district, TED, for the purpose of addressing infrastructure deficiencies in the area to encourage the location, growth, and retention of secondary value-adding industries, which has been found pursuant to resolution number 2194 to be necessary in the interest of public health, safety, or welfare of the residents of Broadwater County, and would enable Broadwater County to better meet the goals and objectives of the growth policy as provided in parts 715, 4201, and 4301 Montana Code Annotated, the state's urban renewal law, and whereas pursuant to 715, 4279 MCA, a TED must be zoned for use pursuant 762201 MCA in accordance with the growth policy. And whereas for the Commission to proceed with the creation of a TED, a zoning district and regulation must be established for the Wheatland industrial commercial areas. And whereas the Broadwater County has had the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning District and regulation with map prepared, and whereas the boundary of the district encompasses about 325 acres and is located along US Highway 287 just north of the Interstate 90 Highway 287 intersection. The boundaries include portions of section 15 and 16, Township 2 North, Range 1 East, Broadwater County, Montana. About 2/3 of the acreage is located on the east side of US Highway 287. A strip comprised of less than 100 acres is located along the west side of US Highway 287 and extends from I-90 north to Wheatland Road. And whereas the general character of the regulation is to provide for an industrial commercial site in accordance with the growth policy, with the intent and purpose of establishing an industrial area for secondary value-adding businesses which are manufacturing, processing, producing, or creating by change the form of raw materials or intermediate products into more valuable products or commodities that are capable of being sold or traded in interstate commerce, and technology-based businesses that, through the employment of knowledge or labor, add value to a product, process, or export service, resulting in the creation of new wealth, and to set forth minimum standards for development. Whereas the boundary of the district and the regulation were submitted to the Planning Board for review, and on June 10, 2019, the Planning Board extended an advisory recommendation finding that the boundary of the district and the regulation is appropriate and is in accordance with state statutes and the relevant land use designations, goals, objectives, and implementation of growth policy, and recommending that the Commissioner create the district and adopt regulations. And whereas notice in accordance and required by state law was posted and published, and whereas the Commission held a public hearing on October 11, 2019 to consider creation of the district and adoption of the regulation. And whereas the Broadwater County Board of Commissioners finds that in accordance with 762201 MCA, for the purpose of promoting the public health, safety, morals, general welfare, it is the intent to create the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning District and adopt the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning Regulation with the map for the district. Now therefore be it resolved, in accordance with 762205 MCA, notice of passage of the resolution of intention shall be published once a week for 2 weeks in a newspaper of general circulation within Broadwater County. In accordance with 762205 MCA, For 30 days after first publication of notice, the commission will accept written protests to the creation of the zoning district or to the zoning regulations from persons owning real property within the district whose name appear on the last completed assessment roll of the county. In accordance with 76-2205 MCA, within 30 days after the expiration of the protest period, the commission may pass the resolution creating the zoning district and adopting the zoning resolution. The resolution for final creation and adoption will be scheduled for the commission and proper notice given at that date. Are there any public comment? Yes.
So I get through on the merit reports. Mind if I give you guys?
Yeah,
We should probably make a presentation.
I can't hear you.
Oh, is that, we thought maybe we should make a presentation explaining this before you have the public comment.
Okay.
If you don't, if the ball's stacked, I think that might.
I'm good with that.
Okay,
Alright.
thank you.
You want me to wait then?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I think I'll go over here. Thank you very much, Chairman Delger and members of the commission. I'm Janet Cornish, and I'm under contract with, to assist the county, Broadwater County, in taking you through the process to create the Wheatland zoning district and the targeted economic development district. This morning, we're actually going through two steps. As Commissioner Delger explained, Delger, which, right?
Yep.
Delger, excuse me, explained the, in reading the resolution, is that it is required prior to the creation of the TED that the area to be considered has to be zoned in accordance with the growth policy. So this first hearing and resolution is on the resolution of intent to adopt a zoning regulation for the area that also coincides with the area that will be the TED. So this is the first step in the process. The second hearing, which will be after this one, will be actually about the creation of the TED. The zoning intent, as the Commissioner explained, is passed at this meeting, but then begins a 30-day protest period. And the state of Montana sets out the conditions for what a protest would be that would constitute delaying it. There are 7 property owners within this district, and those are the property owners that have the right to protest the creation of the zoning district. After that 30-day period expires and there has not been an adequate protest, then the Commission can move with the adoption of the regulation. But in the order of things today, and then again on November 18th, which will be our second set of meetings, the zoning has to be addressed before we can address the TED. So, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Janet, can you explain how the taxing works with the TED? Is there a reduction? Does the TED just kind of keep taxes where they're at? Can you explain how that whole picture works?
Sure, absolutely. So the tax increment financing is a provision that the state enables communities to use within a TED or an urban renewal district. And simply, it has nothing to do with the amount of taxes that are collected. It's only the way those taxes are distributed once they're collected. So if no development occurs in that area, the taxes continue to be collected as they always were and distributed to the various taxing jurisdictions. If there is any increase in taxable value within that area, just the increased portion, just the incremental increase, that portion of the taxes is ICE is segregated from the rest of the fund and is used to invest, in this case, in public infrastructure, public services for the area. But the taxpayers see no difference. So the taxpayers pay what they would have paid irrespective of whether or not there's a targeted economic development district. It's once they pay. So if a company or a business comes into the area and now is paying taxes in that area and was not before, those tax dollars would be directed to this fund for infrastructure improvement. If an existing business were to expand, just the amount of taxes that are attributed to that expansion would go into this special fund. And it's all, with all of the taxes that are collected against the entire mill levy, with the exception of the 6 mill university levy. Or if there's a levy like Commissioner Delger described, where you would have an additional mills that would be for law enforcement, that was passed after the district was created, those 10 mills would all be available to the law enforcement. So they wouldn't be counted in the increment, which I think is, given the comments we heard earlier, I think is important to stress. That money would not go to the increment because the Montana legislature in the last session said if you vote in a mill levy after the district is created, those voted mill levies go to the purpose in which the voters supported. So again, it's not the amount of taxes that the taxpayer pays. That's determined by the taxable value of the property. It's more about what happens after those taxes are collected and how they are distributed for use. Hope that was clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So, but again, the second hearing in particular will be about the TED, and this is just about the land use piece of it. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I guess one thing too I wanted to mention is, I think it's important for people to know that one of the regulations in the zoning is that there can be no dwellings or,
Oh, thank you for, yes.
housing within that district.
That-
It needs to be outside of the district.
That's correct.
Which makes sense. You wouldn't want to have housing in a commercial or industrial area.
Thank you, Commissioner, for keeping me on track there. Yes, there's, as Commissioner Folkvord has pointed out, the zoning allows commercial and industrial uses, but not dwellings. Now, if there's a caretaker, for example, that would be attached, where the dwelling unit would be attached to a business or a dormitory for a police or fire station, that would be allowed. But it's those housing units that are residential area type units that would be have to be located outside the district. It could certainly be adjacent to it, but not within the boundary. Okay, thank you. Thanks so much.
Mr. Gifford.
I'm Sean Gifford, Mayor of Three Forks. I'd like to thank the Commission for letting me speak today. I'm going to read the memorandum that I've given the County Commission. It's my opinion that Broadwater County has failed to provide adequate law enforcement for the residential subdivision in this area. The lack of Broadwater County law enforcement presence has burdened Gallatin County and the City of Three Forks to provide a law enforcement presence. Beyond law enforcement, Broadwater County enacting a TED will have an economic incentive for pulling businesses out of the City of Three Forks and placing a tax base in Broadwater County. Further, it will encourage commercial industrial business to build outside of the Three Forks municipal limits in the TED area. It encourages the change of open agricultural land to commercial industrial business that is contrary to Broadwater's growth plan. The plan as presented for the TED would use the increased taxable value to construct roads, water, sewer facilities, and a grant will be used to construct the new emergency services building. The plan on page 15, fire protection, states goal 3 is to encourage Broadwater County Rural Fire District to have adequate firefighting capabilities. Broadwater County Rural Fire is separate and distinct from the Three Forks Rural Fire, which provides service in the TED area. The plan on page 16, goal 5, is to encourage new growth to locate near existing communities where the services can be provided and provide incentives to encourage new development to locate near existing communities. The TED will accomplish the opposite, as it will encourage growth outside of the city. The encouragement of the TED building its own sewer service eliminates that growth from helping the citizens of Three Forks to pay for current state-of-the-art facilities. The city of Three Forks and the Three Forks Rural Fire District have shared the cost of services, shared firefighters, and paid for insurance and retirement for those good people. Proposing to build a new fire station in this area will force the city of Three Forks to bear the burden of providing fire service on its own. That will increase the cost of Three Forks citizens to provide the same service. In that way, the proposed TED also harms Three Forks. The school is already at capacity and struggles to meet the facilities and faculty needs. By redirecting the increased tax value to pay for water and sewer facility is not in the school's best interest. Those same businesses could seek to locate in Three Forks, connect to existing facilities, and not take the school's increased tax value and tax revenue. If the school was to seek volunteer remittance agreements, those remittance funds are only allowed to reduce the property tax payments or designated reserves. While the school should think strongly about remittance agreements, the statutory remittance plan does not make the school whole if there is any unspent money. I do not support the TED as proposed, as it will negatively affect the city of Three Forks. Do you have any questions for me, Commissioners? Jana? No, we're good.
I have no, except we're talking about the zoning regulation here, not the TED.
Right. I just want the commission to know my feelings on the TED. I think that's kind of nuances here. We are speaking about the same area, and I'm letting the commission know my concerns, as we already subsidize a lot of emergency services in that area from the city of Three Forks. We pay more than our fair share into the fire district. I think we're only receiving about $12,800 from Broadwater County for fire protection, while the people on the other side of the river are paying $140,000 a year. Thank you guys for letting me speak.
Yes.
My name is Dennis Nelson, Mr. Commissioner and Madam, ladies. I'm here representing the Three Forks Rural Fire District. In support of Sean Gifford's letter, I'm just going to single out the one paragraph that he handed to you, ladies and gentlemen. The city of Three Forks and the Three Forks Rural Fire District have shared the cost of services, shared firefighters, and paid for insurance and retirement for these good people in this area. Proposing to build a new fire station in this area will force the city of Three Forks to bear the burden of providing fire services. On its own, it will increase the cost for Three Forks citizens to provide the same service. And this is again for the city of Three Forks. In that way, the proposed TED also harms Three Forks. And specifically, it harms the remainder of the Three Forks Rural Fire District, the majority of which is supported by Gallatin County taxpayers, probably on the 10-to-1 basis that Sean just mentioned from a dollar mill levy standpoint. Because remember that the Three Forks Rural Fire District is a joint fire district. We run probably 90 miles total length from Highway 1 or from milepost 101 all the way to Black Ford on the Madison River. We run from Logan, basically Logan on the interstate, to the Jefferson County line. So we've got a joint support area that we need to cover, and the Rural Fire District is being forced to and asked to support the impacts of the huge building boom that's going on in the south end of the Broadwater County. So with that, I recommend that you consider that as you make your decisions. And do you have any questions for me? Thank you very much for your time, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm Steph Cameron, I'm a school board trustee from Three Forks. I have a question specifically about the zoning.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Steph Cameron from
Oh, okay.
Three Forks School Board. Specifically with the zoning and the assessment of how things work, if everything is considered ag at this point, and that's what we're receiving taxable value from, with the zoning changed, would it go into commercial? Would it be taxed as commercial property?
Mr. Mr. Chairman, may I answer?
Yes.
Yes, thank you for your question. The property does not change its assessment until it's put into different use. So any property that's in the district that continues to be agriculture will continue to be taxed at that rate.
Okay,
That's, what the zoning essentially does is it enables land to be put into those uses, but it does not change the taxation in of itself.
okay.
It's only when those uses change that the property would then be taxed at a commercial or industrial rate.
So when there's any infrastructure added to the lots, then it would be considered commercial? I'm just clarification.
I mean, it kind of will go hand in hand. The commercial development is going to pay for the infrastructure.
No, I mean, like, even if a business moved in and started building a building, would that be considered when they started?
Yes, that's
Okay,
what it started.
okay.
So, thank you, yes, that's correct.
Okay, so until that happens, it's still gonna be considered ag?
Yes,
Okay, even though it's zoned commercial?
even though it's zoned commercial.
That's-
It's not the land use designation, it's the actual use that's occurring at the time
Okay,
of the assessment.
great. That's my only question on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Janet, if we're zoning this as, for the TED, as commercial, so that change in taxable value won't take place until the TED is completely, is expired or built out, right? So
Right, so just a little, I would express it this way, that you can draw a line around an area and say it's a TED, but nothing changes in terms of its taxable value or the method in which the Department of Revenue uses to value the land until there's a business on it. So if there's a business in 1/10 on the land, it's just that business that then will be taxed at a commercial or industrial rate. The rest of the land will continue to be taxed at an ag rate. It's only when the use changes on a particular parcel, not for the whole area. So each of the 7 parcels in the district would continue to pay tax at the same rate it's paying now, unless there's a change of use.
Janet, can you also speak to when the zoning and the TED district sunset is on that?
The zoning district is less, does not have a sunset on it.
Right.
The TED has a 15-year sunset, but it can be extended. If, for example, you sell a bond, you would create a debt that is being paid annually by the TED increment. So then that would extend the life. So let's say, Bridger Brewing does locate its plant there, and its taxes, its increase in taxes, the taxes it's paying will represent an increase to the county. Those funds will be used to retire the debt on the sewer. If it takes, the state said you can extend a district like this for 25 years in order to cover the debt. But without any debt obligation, it sunsets in 15 years.
15 years.
For the TED, but the zoning district has no expiration date.
You said that the TED would terminate in 15. Can it be terminated earlier?
Yes. Yeah, if you got everything done you wanted to get done in 10 years, you can terminate it. What we have found across the state is it usually takes 4, 5, 6 years before you're starting to see any increment of any size. This might come on board more quickly. By that time, then you might need to sell a bond in order to, finance it, and then that would extend it. But the 15 years seems to have, we used to have it at 10 years in the state law, but it was changed to 15 because so many districts really didn't take off in the first few years.
So when you say that you've accomplished everything that you want, that you want to accomplish, is the list of what you want to accomplish established at the very at the very moment that you set the TED? Is that plan in place to say that we're going this far with this TED and then that's the end of it? Or
No,
is that-
because That's a good question. The reason, what we've done, what we typically do in the plans and what most communities do is they don't set those kind of limits because you never know when an opportunity might come. Let's say, if you knew everything today that was going to happen, you could do that. But let's say in year 7, a furniture plant wanted to locate there. And all of a sudden, they had need for more fiber optics, let's say, or for a different, a rail spur. You wouldn't want to limit yourselves in taking advantage of that opportunity. So what we do instead is say, these are the kinds of things that Broadwater County would like to use, not just tax increment fund, but other funds. You can also apply for grants or other, special districts, whatever you'd like to do. You may learn something in 2027 that you didn't know in 2020. So I typically, you don't want to hem yourself in too tightly, which would then limit your ability to take advantage of other opportunities further down the road. So, but communities have said we are at year 10. We feel at this point in time that the district, maybe you've filled it. There's no other opportunity. It's time to return, to start sharing that additional taxes with all the other taxing jurisdictions, and we're done. So, but I think it would be, given the opportunities and economic situation is changing so rapidly, it would probably be not as effective to decide at this point in time what would trigger the end, other than the statutory requirements.
Hi, I'm Amber Hargrove. I'm here representing the Antelope Vista subdivision out in the Wheatland area.
What was your first name again?
Amber
Amber?
Hargrove.
Thank you.
And we would like to protest the zoning area and the TED, because in the last 2 years, the roads in the area have been graded once. And I understand that you guys actually dropped your budget. Is that correct, for the road department this year on your budget? No, that's not correct? Okay. But you don't seem to be able to handle the roads you already have. So if you're putting in more roads in this area, then you're not going to be able to get to anyone else either. So if you don't have the money and the funds, they're going to affect the roads in the whole Broadwater County. And also, I was curious, who asked for this zoning district? Did the people in that zoning district ask for it?
It's a requirement by the state to have a zoning district with a TED.
Oh, because, so you're making the zoning district because of the TED?
That's a requirement.
Okay. And who asked for the TED? The Bridger Brewing, or who decided that was a good idea for the TED?
So here's something that I hope everybody understands. As a commission, we're responsible to
Sure.
look at long-range plans for our county and
Okay.
ways to increase revenue. And this is one mechanism that we're looking down the road in, rather than sometime a short term, something that will be long-term that will last for the lifetime of the county and for our residents. So that was the reason that we're looking at this.
Okay. And has anybody done any water study on the area, as far as not runoff, but is there even water there to accept this? And the sewer, will the sewer work when it goes? So shouldn't you guys have to pay to do all those to start before you actually vote on saying, yes, this is where it needs to be? Okay, thank you for your time.
Any other comment?
Matt Bugman, I'm a new Broadwater County resident, out on the Three Forks side. I'd like to ask, is anybody on the commission, do you guys live on that end of Broadwater County?
No.
No? Nobody on the commission does?
I live close, I live down by South Tosca, so.
Okay.
So
I mean,
I'm your representative.
You're my representative.
Yeah, so you can yell at me.
Yeah. I mean, I know if I was putting a place together and I was gonna put the stuff that I didn't want in my town, bund it up right next to me, I'd put it as far away from me as possible. I'd push my septic right next to my neighbor. I'd push my burn pit right to my neighbor at the other end. I mean, it does bring growth to the county, it brings income, but everybody that's sitting on that end of the county went there to kind of be free from that. You know, wanted to be away from industry and development. That traffic there right now, I mean, I will speak to the law enforcement now that you guys have pushed one deputy out there. The couple hours a day that he's able to spend at the interchange at I-90 and 287, you guys got to increase ticket revenue like 20-fold. Thank God. Because driving an ambulance through that, I get cut off by semi-trucks on a daily basis. I don't want more of it. I don't want more development down there anyway. I understand it's interstate and it's interstate thoroughfare. But most everybody that moved out there to get away from that. I mean, I'm actually moving out there from the Willow Creek Three Forks side, but it's not what everybody was hoping for on that end. I look at the same part of zoning and development moving towards that, Ted, the things that need to happen for that side of the county. I can't think of how many people out there are part of the volunteer fire service, volunteer fire department, or anything else. So putting a station out there, I don't know how you get the manpower to man the station. I think that's going to be more amusing than anything else. But to try and see what comes of it, I don't know. It seems like everybody's making a buck off somebody other's end. So that's my statement on it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question. I'm not sure I understood the answer to, I think it was Amber's question about the roads. What is the plan if this is all passed and happens? Because we do know there are road issues, especially out there. In the next budget, will you increase the road planning budget? Or where will that money come from to take care of those roads with more usage? Maybe I missed that.
All of that infrastructure in there is paid for by the developers and by the taxes that they pay.
Okay, so that will be covered.
It's part of the TED, yes.
Okay.
The tax money that the county is not receiving is spent on the infrastructure inside the TED,
So that will cover the roads as well?
yes.
Perfect, thank you.
I have a quick question. Just regarding the assessed valuation, let's assume that your taxes are frozen as of January 1, 2020, and this goes into operation. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but your commercial appraisals occur every 6 years, is that correct? As opposed to residential that occur every 2 years. When you put in a particular commercial business into this area, and that tax, is that commercial business then evaluated immediately, or is that tax base held for 6 years, or until, whatever the time frame is, it doesn't make any difference, or does it run for that first 2 years or 6 years, whatever it is, and then become additional tax money available to the county?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
may I answer that? Whatever, if there's any development work, let's say they just put a foundation in, that will be picked up on the next year's tax rolls. It happens right away.
It does happen right
Right,
away.
and so with this particular district, if it's passed, it will have a base year of 2019, which means that anything that came in, and if anything was improved after January 1st of this year,
Okay.
it would become part of the increment. But to get specifically to your question, it's my understanding that the Department of Revenue comes in as soon as there's any new, they don't wait the 6 years or the 2 years to capture any additional. And I think they're actually changed it, and they're doing it more often anyway than the 6. I think they've changed the appraisal cycle. But regardless, they always come in if there's any improvements made. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you're
okay.
going from bare ground to a foundation, or a
Right.
foundation to a superstructure, that's picked up when it occurs.
I understand that, but then I'll refer back to the residential assessments that have been occurring in Broadwater County over the last 15 or 20 years that this explosion has occurred down there. From what I'm hearing, and believe me, it's hearsay, so don't take me to the bank on this, but from what I'm hearing is you've got houses that are being lived in south end of Broadwater County that are still taxed on an agricultural basis. Now, that may or may not be correct information, but I direct that comment to not only the county planner, but also to your county commissioners, that if that be a fact, then you're saying that the state assessor is going to come in and assess immediately. I beg to differ if this be a fact in south end of Broadwater County. Because again, because of the huge impact. I understand that there's a huge impact on the growth. But is that going to happen in the first year, or is it going to happen in the sixth year?
I can't speak to the case
And I
that you
can't either,
mentioned.
but the issue is
But
still
the
out there
Department
that that's
of-
going
yeah,
on.
the Department of Revenue works with us on creating these districts.
Right.
So its assessors would be certainly aware that this was taking place.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've never, in the work I've done, in helping about 36 communities, rural, many of them rural, set up these districts, the Department of Revenue has indeed appraised and assessed the property as soon as it comes on the tax rolls. That's been my experience, but I can't speak to this
And I
case.
agree with you, and I can't speak to it totally either. It was just my question, open to investigation and research beyond this. Thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Chair, I can answer some of those questions.
Yes.
Again, Steph Cameron, Three Forks School Board Trustee. I was the former secretary of the Gallatin County Tax Appeal Board, and so I can answer some of these questions if you don't mind. Everybody, Danny, everybody's on a 2-year roll now. There's no more 6s. It's commercial, it's residential, it's everybody. So January 1, 2019 was the beginning of a 2-year cycle, and if there's improvements on a property that they can see, they will come back and reassess January 1, 2020. So mid-cycle, they'll come back and they'll look at it again. And then you'll start another tax roll 2021. They'll reassess again. So DOR should be aware of anything that's going on. They look, they drive around. They're really short-staffed right now, and I believe that the Gallatin County DOR office is actually assessing for Broadwater also. They kind of consolidated their zones. But they should be aware of any new construction, whether it's residential, commercial, whatever it is. They always have their eyes open. They're looking at Google Maps, any new, action with the treasurer's office. So I hope that kind of answers some questions. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
My name is Jeff Elliott, and I'm the superintendent of schools in Three Forks County. Three Forks Schools. When the TED was in talks, there were some meetings that were to be had, and with I believe it was MBEC that asked to have these meetings. I was not contacted to be at a meeting. I happened to be at a meeting that the head of MBEC, I'm also a member of the Chamber of Commerce in Three Forks, and I'm also a member of Civic and Economic Development Group in Three Forks. Mr. Obert actually just happened to be at a meeting, shared that information. But one of my worries is that you are to provide financial information on how this TED is going to impact the local school district. I have seen nothing how this TED is going to impact my district. And I'll tell you right now, based on if you're taxing that agricultural land at what it is now, and in 1 year or 2 years we have a brand new brewery there and an amphitheater, that is going to be taxed at a higher rate. That's the amount, that percentage increase that will be taxed now will be missing out in Three Forks schools. We're in a position where our high school was built in 1952. We're teaching classes, English classes in an auditorium. we've gained 60 students in a Class B school since last count. I will say this, the owners of the brewery they're great people, and they came with our mayor and saw our situation and saw how desperate we are. My fear is that believe me, I support growth, and I think growth is inevitable. We understand that, but I think growth has to be done adequately and correctly. And I think if we're going to offer the TED district, I think we're not keeping in mind the students and the kids of Three Forks schools. I think you're by not having them pay that incremental amount in taxes. In 5 years, you have a brand new brewery that's serving all these people, and we're still not seeing any tax revenue from that. That's wrong. That's wrong to do to those kids. When we're still teaching classes in portables, or we're teaching classes in an English class in an auditorium. And I completely understand. It's Broadwater County, and you can do what you want. But that is also in our school district. And I just wanted to show you that and to make the statement that it's. I wish that you would, the commission and people who've developed the TED would have reached out and talked to us, because I think that they need to play their equitable share. That's part of living in Montana. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Jody Moore, I just had a really quick follow-up question to something that Amber asked. One of the things that I guess I'm confused about is, was the TED planned before Bridger Brewing, or was Bridger Brewing coming and then the TED was planned? Is there, what is the timeline there?
So I can, so I think as part of the county's efforts to engage in economic development, it was the thought of creating the TED is, and correct me if I'm wrong, commissioners, but it's my understanding that in order to get Bridger Brewing to come to Broadwater County, the TED was offered as a means to enable the infrastructure that was needed. And I understand exactly where you're going. The chicken and the egg is always a very important point. And to Superintendent Elliott's point, that you are, without Bridger Brewing, without the TED, there's no new taxes. So the point was to take a more long-term view, I guess, to say, if we are able to have this kind of investment in our county, and which will pay for its own infrastructure rather than the county have to pay, digging into its existing coffers. But this is where that the business itself, business isn't getting a break. In other words, the business still has to pay its taxes. But those taxes go for the infrastructure. Without that infrastructure, the county wouldn't be able to have attracted them. And then what we're left with as a county, what Broadwater County now has, is that infrastructure in place without having to burden the rest of the taxpayers with that cost. So the theory of tax increment financing is to take the long-term view, that you're, in the long term, you're going to be able to have more tax base to support schools, to support roads. But you're doing that where I always call it delayed gratification, where you're getting this new business, but you're not recognizing those taxes for a number of years, but those new tax dollars are going into the infrastructure that will benefit the county as a whole. And in the long term, the school district and the first responders. But it takes a long time. One of my colleagues who works in economic development in communities that depend on timber has said it took 40 years for the timber industry to decline in Montana. It's going to take at least that long to rebuild some of our resource-based communities. in a place like Broadwater County, where you've all been talking about the lack of tax base to support law enforcement and first responders, it's going to take some time to build up that tax base to begin to support them again. So, coming back to your question, it was a tool that Broadwater County decided to use in order to attract Bridger Brewing. Without that tool in place, Bridger Brewing would not have a way, or the county would not have a way to pay for the infrastructure.
Do we know, can I ask you guys, do we know if, has Bridger Brewing purchased that property yet? Do we know, or is that something we don't know? So one of the other questions I have just is with transparency with numbers. How much money has the county spent as far as hiring this lady right here? I'm assuming y'all hired her. How much money has the county spent on this TED as far as trying to get it out there? Is that transparency in those numbers, or those numbers out there?
I'm trying to remember, I mean, that was before I was here, and I remember sitting out in the audience, and was it 30-ish?
No.
I can't
The
remember.
county, the only money we've spent is what Nicole has spent on advertising.
Okay.
And back paid
Oh, that's
to
right.
hire Janet Cornish.
That's right.
So the county, whatever the advertising has been, has really, and copies, has really been the extent of the cost for the county. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. There's a memorandum of understanding between the county and MDAC, and if this district is to be successful and generates increment, and if all the other obligations for infrastructure are paid, then the county will reimburse MDAC for my time. But it would only come out of the increment, not out of the general fund.
So if this doesn't happen, then MBAC doesn't get
Paid back.
paid? Okay. One of the other questions I had is, and it just left my head just that fast. I'll just save that for another time. Thanks.
I've got another question to go with.
Yes.
So the statement of infrastructure is what's attracting business. Infrastructure is what attracted every homeowner on that into the county. That infrastructure isn't Broadwater infrastructure. That infrastructure is Gallatin County and Three Forks infrastructure. So is there a motion to is there a TED for, housing that we can start applying that same taxation level to all the houses and everything that's being developed out there right now to support what they need for school development, for increased EMS, just to get the bridge fixed on Old Town Road? That thing's been closed down to EMS and first responders because of weight limits and nobody wants to claim it. Broadwater doesn't list it on their bridge site. Gallatin doesn't list it on theirs. I mean, if that's what we're talking about is infrastructure, taxation to build infrastructure, or whatever it was, infrastructure to attract people, that is what has attracted everybody to that end of Broadwater County. You've got the school, you've got the community, you've got the EMS, and you've got the support. But it's not coming from Townsend, it's not coming from, Winston, it's not coming from anything other than those folks that we're leveraging out of Three Forks.
I want to ask this question. Let's say that the TED's not being developed and the growth continues. What's your plan?
What's my plan?
I mean, how would we continue to fund the fire department and the school? I mean, it'd be the process that's in place currently, right?
No, it's the same piece. It's what is the plan? And that's, I guess, a question that's kind of your guys' point of the plan. Now, I'd come up with it, it's the same thing. If we're going to do a TED, then, and I'm a property owner out there, the tax burden now has to fall on the property owners. Those mills need to be kind of equivalent. On the Gallatin County side mill, if my mill for my $100,000 home is going to cost me $1,000 in taxes, then my mill and my $100,000 in Broadwater should be getting the same amount to the schools, to the fire, to whatever, of the county that's supporting them, of that school district. And it's not making it there. It's not equivalent because your mill isn't the same as a Gallatin County mill.
We can't change that.
So
We can't change that. That's set by state statute.
It sounds like if we can change it for a commercial zoning district, why, and you just said, you actually, who was it that just said that you could create that same mill levy for fire support and everything like that? I can't remember, I wrote it down, I come up with it. You know, using a mill levy deliberately targeted at those people at that end of Broadwater County,
Passed by the voters.
passed by the voters.
Passed by the voters.
So
in
this doesn't have to
actuality-
be passed by the voters. So the voters can say, all this tax income that's gonna come in and go to this zone, this TED, you guys get to decide if that money comes into to Broadwater County at the expense of the actual voters that live in Broadwater County. But the voters are the ones that have to decide, well, man, those guys get a full tax break and now I have to pay the tax burden to support the schools, fire and EMS infrastructure that I actually moved here to get. While we increase traffic, increase everything in that end of the county without them paying their fair share towards fire, EMS, schools, and the community around them. All their employees, everybody else that floats around there, enjoy it, but they don't get, they pay taxes, it just doesn't go to that. So, I mean, they are paying their fair share for something else. So it's, that's my take on infrastructure attracting business. It attracts residents too, and the residents should get their fair shake. Both should be voted on the same way.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Yeah, you bring up some really important points, and I think I'd like to just take a minute. The number of mills that are levied, if you have a property in Broadwater County, the number of mills that are levied is a combination of the school levy, the county levy, the state levy, and all the various districts that are, the fire and so forth. That doesn't change when you create a TED. The number of mills levied doesn't change.
Yes.
The only thing that changes is that you have more value, the value of the mill goes up, but you can, you're only levying against an increase in taxable value. If someone has a $20,000 house, they pay fewer taxes than someone with a $100,000 tax.
Yes.
It's just the same mills.
I understand.
So we're not, the second thing you brought up is that Montana allows urban renewal districts to have housing in them, and housing then benefits, but housing in general doesn't create enough new taxes to really pay for infrastructure. You yourself, when you're paying a $1,000 tax bill, that's a lot, versus a company that might pay several $100,000 in taxes. So actually to have a viable, enough money to actually pay for infrastructure, it typically has to.
Yes, that's why generally we lay out proper impact fees and all those other things that grow
correct.
towards infrastructure.
That's correct.
Yes.
So I
I
wanted
understand
to-
the process
Okay,
completely.
okay, all right.
I'm
So
just, you know,
and it's-
that entire end of Broadwater County has exploded, and I would say honestly has exploded in the last 4 years, the amount of homes that have popped up.
Right. And
You know, whether that's
county-
Price
right.
Road, Wheatland Meadows, and who knows what's gonna happen with.
Now, I don't want to speak for the commission. I'm only going to tell you what the statute says. And that is that you could have a cooperative agreement where if you can establish what part of the budget, let's say for facilities, were used by Broadwater County. In other words, you allow for connecting infrastructure. So if you were to make improvements to a station in Three Forks, a facility to serve, and I say that the Wheatland TED was using 10% or 20% of your services, you can help contribute to that cost with a TED. But it would have to be aligned directly to some asset.
Okay.
So that's something, and I can't speak for the commission, I'm just telling you what the law says. That you can, we've done this in other places where we've created sewer and water infrastructure outside of a district and brought that new infrastructure in, and that the TED can pay for that in proportion to the amount of.
So who votes on how that TED pays for it? So if we're bringing in this TED that's gonna last 15 to 25 years, because you can keep
Right.
adding on it and go, I wanna build a sewer, you know what? I
You
wanna
can
repave
never
this road
extend it.
more, I wanna do whatever. You can keep growing on what your debt is, and it'll extend to
But
pay the debt off.
Right, but not after the 15 years. You
Okay.
have to, You have to get all the debt set by the end of the 15 years.
Okay, so you've amassed all your debt in 15 years. At the end of the 15 years, who gets to vote on what that debt amassing is? Is it the 7 people or the 7 current property owners in that area?
No,
that
no,
can
it's
subdivide?
all up to the commission.
Okay, so the commission has the ability to say, hey, this TED's attracting this much business and this many people, and you know what? We do need to help. Use money from the TED can be allocated towards the school because it's brought in this
Yeah,
many
well, no,
more
I
people
wouldn't
to
say
the
the
community.
school, but there are some opportunities that if you could sit down and talk about it.
You could talk a metric of ambulance response, fire response, and otherwise,
can
and say,
look
hey,
at
we had 10% of our responses here, so 10% of whatever, you can actually come up with a metric and do it. But if it's attracting business, which is attracting residents, again, infrastructure attracts more.
But then those
Well, how does that not
residents,
impact the school?
because the residents are going to be paying taxes that don't go into the increment.
But they're not paying the same share. They're not paying their same share. They're not, a multi-million-dollar industry. Their mill, again, my $100,000 home versus a multi-million-dollar construction complex, the mill is the mill. I can pay 20 mills towards a school, which would be equivalent to half a mill of that complex. It's not the same. That's what,
Yeah, but
that's why I'm
it is-
asking.
Yeah, the commission has the right to decide within the law, and I don't want to get into the weeds on what the law says specifically, but there may be some opportunities to work together.
So what company, you represent MBEC?
No, MBEC is my client,
MBEC is your client, okay.
and I'm a community development specialist, and I was hired by MBEC to help the county
And
go
MBEC
through
is
the steps.
Broadwater based?
It's an economic development entity that's outside it's a separate entity from the county, but it serves as an economic development function for the county. That's
Okay.
correct. Okay.
No, I'm just trying to make sure, the MBEC name sounds familiar and the people on the board.
Montana Business
I've heard-
Assistance Connection
Yeah.
is the client who's assisting the county in going through this process. But
Okay.
it's through a memorandum of understanding, so that it is on behalf of the county.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a super quick question. Could this go to a vote of the residents instead of you 3 deciding? Is that legal? Is it, as far as the TED? Could the TED, yes or no, the vote, could it go to the residents instead of you 3 deciding the future of it?
I don't believe that's, it can't, right? I think the commission has to make that decision.
It is a commission responsibility.
I think another thing to consider too is that if this district is created, there'll be an advisory board, appointed from people in that area that will advise the commission on matters within the TED. So it's not going to be just us making that decision. We'll have an advisory board from folks in that area.
I just have a couple of questions because I'm not real savvy in this area, so I just have some questions for you. So that money that you're going to be putting back into the infrastructure from the incremental gains,
Correct.
that money, most of our tax money is then taken care of by our county tax assessors, and it goes to the county. So this money, is it then controlled by Broadwater County? So let's say I put, the incremental gain is $100,000 that's going to go back into who controls that money?
The commissioners,
Oh, the commissioners then, and they're the ones that put it back into,
into the infrastructure.
I get.
But as Commissioner Folkford just mentioned, the counties can set up advisory boards if they'd like, and that advisory board in some places has included the school superintendent, so the schools can get involved in it. Again, the county has the final say on all budgetary matters and policy matters, but sometimes people who have a specific interest in the future of the community can serve on those advisory boards. You have to be careful because being county residents versus
Well,
not,
and we're unique. It's a completely unique situation.
because
here.
you have that shared jurisdiction.
Yeah. So it's Broadwater County, but we're a Three Forks district where we accept those students from that.
So
it's-
if you can talk with the commissioners and express your interest in serving on that advisory board, and that way you can bring your perspective, and I
Sure.
think that would be really worthwhile. So,
Thank you. Yeah, that's all my.
Are we on the second agenda item, or are we still on the zoning?
still,
I have a couple of questions. So I believe by state statute that the zoning district had to be approved by all the people in the zoning district. Have they all approved that?
I can answer that question too. Sorry to keep interrupting. There are two kinds of zoning districts. One is under, called Part 1 zoning, which, as you say, has to be initiated by the property owners. Part 2 zoning is zoning that is in support of the growth policy. So the growth policy, that's the master plan for Broadwater County, has indicated that this area is an area where commercial industrial development should occur. Based on that, the Montana statute allows for the zoning process that we have just gone through, which is to put out notice that it's going to be, that there's an intent to create this and allows a protest period.
Okay.
It does not have to be initiated by the property owners. The law that governs the creation of TEDs says you have to do this Part 2 zoning, which is growth policy directed. So it's more, this is how Broadwater County envisions this area to grow as a commercial and industrial area. That's in your growth policy that was adopted in 2003. And therefore, what the law says about creating urban renewal districts and TEDs is that you have to have it be zoned in accordance with the growth policy. So that triggers Part 2. So there was not a requirement in this type of zoning for it to be initiated by the property owners. But I will say the 7 property owners that are in the district are all aware of this zoning issue, and I know that members of the commission and of MBAC have been in touch with those property owners to discuss the implications for their properties, and property owners that did not want to be zoned actually requested to be taken out of the district, and they were. So the 7 ones remaining have agreed to do this.
Okay. And then my other question is, so if Bridger Brewing just buys the property and starts building, the school, the fire, and everybody in the area will be better off not in the TED, because they'll actually get more taxes because it'll be a commercial building going up, just like the Styrian, all the other businesses out there, Wheat Montana. So there's really no reason for a TED. They're better off, you just approve them to build, and then the school will get at least the taxes from them.
They can't build without the TED because the TED's going to pay for the infrastructure.
But they don't have to do the TED. They don't have to do a TED.
But how are they going to get their sewer system paid for?
They build their own
That
instead of putting everyone with it. So that's something for you guys to consider also. Thank you.
Any other comment?
Excuse me, Tim Ravendall, citizen, taxpayer. Been following our local government for a long time. And one of the things that we've seen in the past, and I'm just bringing this up because it, to some extent, seems like it's going to happen again, where we have the cart before the horse, and then we got to back up and do it again. I've seen it many, many times, and I hope we don't see it again. My point that I'd like to have you really take a really close look at, and it was just talked about, and that is under the growth policy. We are operating this zoning type 2 under the current growth policy, but yet the planning board, the commission, the county planner, and everybody has been working with a contractor to develop a new growth policy, and that part of that process has not been, in my understanding and knowledge, been brought into this process to keep the people fully informed on where that growth policy is, because each time I've asked personally as a citizen, what is the status of the growth policy, it's under review. And that's all I hear. So without knowing any details, certainly a growth policy is going to have an impact on the creation of zoning, and it's going to have a creation of land use, and it's definitely going to impact private property. With that said, Commissioners, just please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Yes, Joey?
Can you remember what you were going to say?
I didn't, I wrote it down. I did, but I had to write it down. It stinks being old. So I just wanted to clarification and understanding for my purposes on what the role of MBAC is in all of this. So can I ask that, and can that be explained?
I'll let Janet explain it. She's contracted by MDOT.
MBAC is, my understanding is that MBAC is a regional economic development organization. It assists both, I think, three counties, Lewis and Clark and Broadwater County. And in that role, it helps in a number of different ways. It helps secure grants for affordable housing. It works with businesses to recruit them to this three-county area. It provides, as you mentioned, you even talked about the grant that for earlier that MBAC was helping you with. They help local communities write grants for public purposes. They have a mission that address the wide-ranging economic and community development needs of the three counties. Their role in this project was to work with Broadwater County in recruiting a value-adding business. In other words, a business that uses Montana resources and adds value. For many years, and for its history, Montana's been a resource state. And most of what happens here is that our resources go elsewhere and other people make money off of this. The legislature said, well, we need to start looking at ways which we can add value to Montana resources here. That's what brewery essentially does that. It takes Montana ag products and improves their value. So MBAC has that mission to try to help with value-adding economic development, to help more of the wealth of these businesses stay locally. So to that end, MBAC in the county decided it might be a good idea to look at how a targeted economic development district could assist in that process. So by offering this ability to provide assistance to value-adding industries, MBAC chose to pursue this. It entered into a memorandum of agreement with Broadwater County to hire my firm to assist the county in doing this. And so all of the costs of my time, and I have a colleague I work with on this, Lynette Windemaker, she and I have been working for Broadwater County, but through MBAC, and MBAC has paid, as we heard earlier, our entire fee with the exception, the cost of doing this, with the exception of the staff time devoted to our support and advertising. So, but their role is to support economic and community development activities in this three-county region.
And it's my understanding too, Commissioner Obert, that your husband, Brian Obert, works for MBAC in some way, shape, or fashion?
Brian Obert is the executive director of MBAC, yes.
And he's your husband?
Yes, he is.
Okay, thank you.
25 years this past September.
I thought.
Yes,
I'm Barbara Mutter, and I represent Three Forks Area Ambulance. I have a couple of things to say. I worked with USDA Rural Development on a grant for the ambulance recently, and worked very close with Frank out of DIS in Gallatin County to get the accurate home count in South Broadwater County from mile marker 101 down south. And in Broadwater County currently you have 883 homes under my care for ambulance response. I believe that you said, ma'am, that it would take years to catch up the tax base after the infrastructure is paid for. And I am very concerned. I've had many calls at this point, 3 in Broadwater County, where my ambulance was dispatched to a domestic or a suicide stage for law enforcement, and we did not get backup. My EMTs are volunteers. They do not wear bulletproof vests. These situations across the country are the worst situations to go into. I guess my point in this, I am not against development. I would just like to see if there is an avenue where we can look at some of that money that would go back in the infrastructure of the TED district that could be somehow funneled out, and some of those funds go to the school, go to the fire, and go to the police, go to Broadwater County Sheriff's. We're already behind. I can't wait 15 years for increased taxes. We need to look at this problem today. I don't want to bury anymore. I've buried two that were close to me. Thank you very much. And I don't want to see any of my EMTs put in jeopardy with not having adequate law enforcement. And this growth, I think we're going to see even more growth. Broadwater County, the lower taxes, Gallatin County is getting what I just read in the newspaper, $300 a month. Those people are not going to be able to afford Gallatin County houses, and they're coming. I don't think they're not coming, but I think we have to prepare. And I'm just wondering, is there some avenue of negotiations with this tax money that would go back? So I pay 62.8% of my tax bill goes to the school, and I very much back the school. All right? I'm not saying I'm paying too much. And I'm in favor of the mill levy or the bond that we may need. The school is bursting at the seams. Okay, but so say this business comes in and they produce a tax of $100,000 a year. And it goes back to pay for their sewer system, which is what I read. I didn't read water, I read sewer only.
That's correct.
All right? And then, but of that money, of that tax money, is there a way that we can sit down and negotiate that some of that portion of that, so 62.8% is my bill, so say they pay $100,000 in taxes, that's $60,000 in taxes back to the school. Is there a way to negotiate that maybe $30,000 of that taxes could go back into the school to build, and maybe a portion of that go to law enforcement in Broadwater County and go to fire? The ambulance at this time does not collect any tax money. I need to make that clear, that I didn't make that clear. I bill, and we get donations, and we bill insurance companies for transport. But I am concerned, and I'm concerned that we're going to build this building, but we've got the cart before the horse. You don't have the manpower. You can have the best ambulance, the best fire truck, the best law enforcement vehicles. If you don't have the manpower, you have nothing. And a community is its school, its law enforcement, its ambulance service, and its fire department. That's what makes up your community. So I guess the end of my question is there a way to negotiate some of the TED district monies, a portion of that to go back into those emergency services and the school district? Thank you for your time.
Yes, I can answer at least part of your question. So the Montana legislature says you can remit, the word I use is remit, a portion of the funds that you don't need. Okay, so the first assumption is there's going to be some money you don't need. And that money, though, can't all go to the schools. It has to be divided according to in proportion to the mills that are levied. So you're pointing out 62%. So for every dollar that you remit, 62 cents would go for the schools. and 30 cents would go to the other taxing jurisdictions. So that's the answer to your first question. The second is, in the last legislative, 2017, I believe, there was a court case in Anaconda that drove this. You cannot use the money in the school, if it gets a remittance, can only use it to offset property taxes. It cannot use it for the building funds or anything of that nature. It only can offset. So let me tell you a story. In Ramsey, several years ago, Butte-Silver Bow County remitted a portion of the tax increment to the Ramsey School District. Everyone was happy. The taxes went down, and the next year they couldn't remit anything because the next year the property owners had protested their taxes, and so there wasn't enough money to pay the bond. So they couldn't remit any portion in the next year. So what did they have to do? The voters had to pay more taxes again. So everybody had whiplash. So what I'm trying to tell you is you can't just remit a portion without understanding that that money, the tax increment has been pledged to pay for certain things. If it's pledged to a bond, if it's pledged to if in fact they got $100,000 in taxes from the increment, that would be pledged to pay for the sewer system through a debt. You can't, and let's say you're collecting $150,000, so you say, we only need $100,000, we're going to give $50,000 back to all the other taxing jurisdictions. They can do that. But what if someone protests his or her taxes? They need that extra $50 to make up that loss. So you have to be careful about simply sending money back. Are you following me? Yes, go ahead.
So there would only be one of the 7 members of the TED that protest the taxes that would potentially affect the remitted taxes then?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So if one of the 7 members of the property owners decides he or she isn't going to pay taxes that year, is protesting. That money, as you know better than I, gets set aside. They have to pay it, and then it goes into an escrow of some sort. The tax increment district doesn't have access to that money. So if they have a bond payment due for the sewer system, that money's not available. So the bond council always requires that you have in reserve at least 1 or 2 years, depending on the project, of reserve. So you can't simply say, oh, we have some extra money, we're going to give it to the schools. Mm-hmm. The schools can take it, but they can only use it to lower taxes. They can't add to it. And then the next year, a property tax owner says, wait, my bill last year went down for schools, and this year it's going back up. So there's a political cost of doing that as well. I hope that explains. It's not that complicated. It's just sometimes harder to explain than it needs to be. But it's just, you have to have enough money in the bank in order to fulfill your obligations. I'm hoping we're not taking too much time in all this.
Any other public comment? Okay, we will close the public hearing and open the decision to adopt the resolution to create the Broadwater County Regional Area Zoning District and Regulation.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion. I move to approve the resolution to intent to adopt the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning District and the Broadwater County Wheatland Area Zoning Regulation pursuant to MCA 76-2201.
And I will second the motion.
Motion's been made, seconded. Is there any further discussion? I would like to make one comment. The issue here is not today and tomorrow, the issue is the future. The problem that the state has and the problem the counties are going to have is that next year Coal Strip 1 and 2 are shutting down. That's a $25 million hit to the state budget. The first thing that's going to happen when the legislature convenes is they're going to come after entitlements. Entitlements is what we fund public safety with. 5 years after that, 3 and 4 are shutting down. This county gets $750,000 a year from transmission line taxes. My guess is I don't know where that money is going to get replaced at. And if we as a county don't try to attract more businesses, to set a better solid tax base. Our taxes are gonna have to come from residents. And we're gonna end up being, you talk about the mill levy for Gallatin County, a mill in Gallatin County is like $213,000. A mill in Broadwater County is $17,000. And that, the problem with Colstrip shuts down and we don't have any replace for that income, we're gonna have to cut services that we're already at the bare bones we're at right now. I mean, I realize it's 7, 8, 10 years down the road, but at least with this, in 10 years, we have an influx of money coming in. If we don't do this, and we just allow, say Bridger Brewing comes in and builds their plant, but nobody else comes in, then that growth is very, very slow. Look at the growth we've seen down there, it's basically nil. If Bridger Brewing comes in and establishes a sewer system and water, there's other investors that are looking at that to move in there at a much quicker rate. But if we sit there and don't do anything, then it's going to be really slow. And as far as us pushing it to the south end of the county because we don't want it here, that's the ideal location, simply because of the location of the interstate. If we want a Bridger Brewery here, they got to truck everything back to the interstate. Their location is what's pushing that. And it's not, in reality, Broadwater County does not see a whole lot of this money because the majority of it goes to the Three Forks School District. A majority of the tax money goes to the fire district. So Broadwater County, in the general fund, I mean, we're not going to see a whole bunch of that money because it all goes to different districts. I mean, we're going to see some, but it's not going to be the huge increase that, I mean, the Broadwater Schools is in the same situation as the Three Forks School, but Broadwater School is not going to see an increase because of this TED. I mean, and that's where we're at. I mean, the thing is, we're not looking at today. We're trying to look at tomorrow, and to me, tomorrow's not looking very good unless we do something with how we're going to replace the income from Colstrip. This is one way for Broadwater County to address that. Maybe it's a little bit further down the road, but it's not that far down the road before the two of them are going to collide, and that's going to be a huge problem for residents and counties and everything else. And that's really all I have to say about it. So I guess we can, if there's no other comments, we'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same. Motion carries.
Can I have you sign the resolution for tonight, please?
Now we will we'll close the commission meeting, go back to a public hearing to provisional adoption of the ordinance to create the Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development District and Comprehensive Development Plan. I need to read this whole thing.
No. The audience votes no.
I would say maybe just the therefore.
What's that?
Just the, I would say just the title,
Sure.
paragraph right here, and then therefore be it resolved.
An ordinance designating the Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development Area, creating the Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development District, and adopting the Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development District Comprehensive Development Plan with a tax increment financing provision pursuant to Title VII, Chapter 15, Part 42 and 43 of the Montana Code annotated.
I think it's on the first page, but I would suggest just this part.
Numbers, it's up to you though.
Now therefore be it ordained by the Broadwater County, by the Board of County Commissioners, the Commission of Broadwater County, as follows. Pursuant to 715-4279 MCA, a local government may by ordinance and following a public hearing authorize the creation of a TED in support of value-adding economic development projects for the purpose of the development of infrastructure to encourage the location and retention of value-adding projects in the state. The county has had prepared a statement of infrastructure deficiencies to provide the necessary foundation upon which to establish a TED to foster secondary value-adding economic development in an industrial commercial area of the CDP. The county has found pursuant to resolution number 2019-4 the creation of a TED for the purpose of addressing infrastructure deficiencies in the area to encourage the location, growth, and retention of secondary value-adding industries to be necessary in the interest of public health, safety, or welfare of the residents of Broadwater County and would enable Broadwater County to better manage the goals and objectives of the 2003 Broadwater County Growth Policy Plan, the Growth Plan. The Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development District, the Wheatland TED, encompasses about 325 acres and is located along U.S. Highway 287 just north of Interstate 90, Highway 287 intersection. The boundaries include portions of sections 1516 Township 2 North, Range 1 East, Broadwater County, Montana. About 2/3 of the acreage is located on the east side of U.S. Highway 287. A strip comprised of less than 100 acres is located along the west side of U.S. Highway 287 and extends from I-90 north to Wheatland Road. Pursuant to 715-4212 and 4279 MCA, the county has caused a comprehensive development plan to be prepared to enable the county to use increment financing as development plan to be prepared to as a tool to foster targeted economic development and help fund the supported public infrastructure for the growth of infrastructure intensive secondary value-adding economic development in the industrial commercial area of the CDP. The Montana Department of Revenue will certify the base taxable value of a newly created TED if the department determines that the information required in Montana Administrative Rule 4219-1404 exists and has been provided to the department by the local government that has created the TED when it notifies the department that the TED has been created. The county notified the department of its intent to create the Wheatland TED prior to August 1st, 2019. Is there any public comment? Yes.
I have several questions, so bear with me. If the TED is adopted, how long will it take the revenues from Bridger Brewing to be able to pay you as a consultant? How many years approximately?
So that's a hard question to answer. Okay, and it wouldn't be to pay me, it would be to reimburse Broadwater County. I've already been paid by MBAC.
Oh, okay, so it would be to pay MBAC then, correct?
Right, correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
And so the answer to your question is it's unknown, because we don't know how much increment's actually going to be collected. So, and how much the cost of the sewer system would be. So the way it's worded is if there's increment available beyond that, then MBAC would be reimbursed.
So the first revenues from this would go to pay for the sewer system, and then it would go to MBAC after that?
That's my understanding. I don't have the copy of the memorandum
No,
of understanding
I'm
here.
just-
I neglected to include that in my pile here.
You're fine, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Is it possible for Bridger Brewing to obtain a wastewater permit where the location is without the huge infrastructure?
I don't know the answer to that question. The only thing I know that, and again, that's not my area of expertise.
Right.
Okay.
Right,
But
it's a question.
it is my understanding that they could build a temporary sewer system, but that it would not be sufficient.
They would have.
It would have to be, the system that is required is going to be paid for through a combination of, the tax increment's only going to be paying a portion of it. In the long term, there's going to have to be a sewer and water district created
Okay.
that would support that for the maintenance. And I know there's efforts to put together a combination of funds. So that question could be directed towards Bridger Brewing or MBAC, to find that out. But my understanding is that the tax increment is just a piece of that.
So say the TED didn't go into place, Bridger Brewing wouldn't be able to exist without the huge infrastructure. They couldn't get a standard septic permit.
That's my understanding, unless the sewer and water
That's-
district were to be much larger than what's anticipated.
Right. So commissioners, have you considered a water and sewer district instead, and just, having the district even serve Old Town residents, because they have problems also?
Well, here's one of the unique things about this. It will be a separate district at this point. Anybody outside the TED could possibly ask to be a user of the district.
Okay, so if the TED doesn't exist, I guess I'm just asking in general, the infrastructure, like, you could go create a water and sewer district without the TED. Is that something you've thought about, considered,
How does it pay for it?
from the people that join in on it? I know that it takes a considerable amount of money to build the water and sewer district before you can even start bringing in, and so, like a rural improvement district, a water and sewer district, anything outside of the TED itself, just other options. Have those been considered at all?
I can answer at least part of that.
Okay.
Yes, that the cost would be prohibitive for it to just be the sewer and water district. It's always been conceived of that it would be a partnership between the tax increment financing and the water and sewer district. And the incentive for the property owners to buy into that district has been that it would be less because of the TED. Not so that the cost of just doing the district would be prohibitive.
So if it's only Bridger Brewing that comes in, there's a good chance that the water and sewer district will never be achieved because they will not have enough tax revenue to pay for it.
I believe that's true.
I don't believe that's true.
Okay, so that's my question, that's why I'm like,
The way it's structured right now, that if Bridger Brewery was the only tenant, that their tax revenue would pay for that infrastructure.
for the whole water and sewer district? Okay, that answers my question.
That's how it's structured right now.
Okay,
If other tenants come in, if we're successful, then they
The
will.
more the merrier.
They'll contribute, yeah.
yep, okay.
And there will be a separate water sewer district board
Yep,
that manages that. It won't be part of the county.
right. Right. Just another taxing district, much like the school, fire, all these other things, okay. So, this is kind of funny, and I've been to meetings with you commissioners about the bridges before. I'm pretty familiar with how all that goes and what's kind of a place you're in. I commend you for the economic development of your county, it's tough. I just have a request regarding the Old Town bridges. If there is a possibility for you to take some of that tax increment financing and put it toward your half of the Old Town bridges, that would be fantastic for everybody's sake. For the schools, I mean, we're putting miles on our buses and depreciating them much faster. If we could just get across those bridges, those kids could be home sooner. And emergency services could use them, fire could use them with lower response times. If there was a bad wreck on 287 and it got blocked, that's a huge public risk, safety, all those things. They don't technically have the ability to go over those bridges. You'd be driving through fields and taking out fences, which, you got to do what you got to do. But please consider that in all of your discussions. And also, please consider meeting with the school board to talk about different possibilities of still supporting your school and in the community. I don't know anybody that would want to move to an area to go to work for somebody if their school was failing, if their fire couldn't get to them, if they didn't have any police services. I wouldn't want to go there. You look at Helena, Helena's booming because their schools are amazing. There's jobs everywhere. Everybody wants to go to Helena right now. I don't know, not so much Bozeman because nobody can afford it, but, you know, just please consider making a good foundation before you just build a straw bale house on top of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I'll speak for 2 more minutes. Sorry. No. Sean Gifford. I just say is, I get it. I get the position you're in. Our coffers aren't exactly spilling over in Three Forks, and what you guys are going to be asking us to do the next 15 years is help subsidize the growth. And I get it. I just hope we can still afford to pay for the emergency services going forward, and there's not going to be a break of service for Broadwater County residents. As the mayor of Three Forks is my concern. And then hopefully you guys take that in consideration moving forward. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Yeah, I have a question. So are you voting on the TED today, then,
Yes.
like you did with the district? So I thought you said it was in 2 weeks and then it's a, so you vote on establish them before you have the public comment?
It's provisional.
It's
So we
provisional?
have a 30-day comment period, so November 18th, we will all meet again, and then we will decide whether we're going forward.
Okay, so do I need to reiterate what I said earlier, or will that go for the whole meeting then with this too? Okay. I had one more question, but I'd forgotten it, so, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Brandon Harrison, the undersheriff. Just a couple questions, because I've been to a lot of these meetings. I've heard 2 different things. That Bridger Brewing is coming whether this TED happens or not, and then now that Bridger Brewing is not coming unless this TED happens, and I guess I'd just like to clarify that first.
That's not too big, really,
Okay.
in my mind.
So,
I mean,
the other thing I'd like to have you guys keep in mind when you make your decision is that you know our situation down there. Everybody here knows it. It's nothing to be proud of on a law enforcement standpoint, and nor do I want you to make this decision based on controlling what people do on their property. My concern is the amphitheater and how many people that's going to bring to our county and how we're going to provide a law enforcement service to that.
I can answer that question for you.
Okay.
It's my understanding that they will provide all their own.
All their own law enforcement?
All their own security.
Security.
And I can't remember the name of the firm they use, but it's a pretty reputable firm.
Okay.
That does these types of events to minimize that impact for our local law enforcement. So I don't know all the details.
That's fine, that answers some of my concerns, whether we could set maybe like a county ordinance that, you know, a certain size event has to afford security, or a law enforcement, especially with alcohol sales and things like that. My other concern is, and maybe something I want to clear up with some of these fine folks from that area, is we did add a deputy down to the Three Forks area. He's going to live there. His house is almost done. That position isn't a new position. It was created on sacrificing our detective position. So we're cutting back on what we're able to do on some felony investigations to have that job. However, what has happened this year with increase of the cost for law enforcement, fuel, you know, all those types of things, and then a cost of living increase, which all of our people deserved what they got, and could have been a little bit more. However, we had to cut back due to some mistakes and things that we found in our budget, and we had to cut roughly $20,000 out of a deputy sheriff. So with that, he's not going to be able to be down there as much as we thought, and I know you guys already know this, I've discussed this with you. And my concern is adding another business. Every single business in that district has been victimized from some sort of crime several times through my past 15 years here due to the lack of law enforcement. And I just want you guys to take that into consideration, probably more so than the city of Townsend and businesses here, just because there's never anybody down there. And just some of my concerns that I wanted to address and let these people know that, you know, we're trying, but I think that obviously we'll probably have to come down to a mill levy for public safety to do that. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, I kind of want to step aside from Bridger Brewing. What other companies have petitioned coming in there? No idea. I know Fubar Holdings has been petitioning to come into Three Forks as well, and they've got the second largest chunk of that section of highway. So they haven't presented anything that they want to do in that section of highway that would apply to this TED or anything else. So if this zone is now zoned completely commercial,
Industrial.
industrial.
With
So
an
does that,
emphasis on industrial.
so no residential, no multi-unit apartment complex, work, live? I heard the mention of, you know, a caretaker site. Does that include work, live facilities? Like, so if they did the industrial shop underneath, apartment upstairs, is that
No,
zoned
no,
industrial?
It's not, the Montana law is pretty clear on the kind of zoning that can occur in an area like this. And it is, I'm all for work live. That's a great concept, but it's allowed in urban renewal districts, but not in targeted economic development districts. You want to, because of conflicts between the work and live situations, residential situations, the state has not allowed that to occur. However, housing can occur adjacent to that, just, you know, right outside the boundary of the district.
Okay. And so the current housing that's in that area is going to be grandfathered in?
Correct.
The chickens and all?
Correct.
Industrial chickens. Awesome.
Right.
Okay. I mean, that, I guess, I don't see, and I know it was mentioned earlier, Bridger Brewing wanting to be there right there because they're by I-90. Do you know where Bridger Brewing is currently located with their production facility?
No.
They are literally right across the street from the college. They're in the college complex. They produce, they ship, they can, and it goes everywhere. So the primary of this, I don't believe, is to expand brewing altogether, is to put in an amphitheater and generate that revenue to turn comparative to the Kettle House. You know, that's the targeted conversation. So when we talk about the security on site, that's not as big a concern. Again, when we start talking first responders and law enforcement, just like Rockin' the Rivers, just like Country Jam, it's a head-on collision in the canyon. It's everybody who decides to take a back road home because they got to get back to Bozeman, and they either decide to try and cut down through Norris and do the giant loop, or try and take a frontage road through Manhattan and everybody else, down Old Town Road, into, off of, and through that entire bridge section and everything else. So I understand it's going to happen. Once it is zoned, once the TED's generated, TED only exists for this industry. It can't be rezoned after it's already a TED.
So if I understand your question right, at the end of the TED's period.
I'm talking during the TED.
During the, no, so we have to actually, and I think we've all been using terms interchangeably, and I've been guilty of that. It's a tax increment provision that only lasts 15 years.
Yes.
Or 20, or 40 if you add the 25. The TED can continue to exist and use other financial tools.
Mm-hmm.
As long as that area is a TED, the zoning cannot change.
Okay, so it can only be industrial
Industrial.
while zoned
Right.
within the TED.
That's correct. If the TED, if the county disbands, the tax increment provision runs out, the county decides it no longer wants to have that district, then it can rezone it if it does. But there's one other thing that we haven't talked about. The TED can establish a revolving loan fund with tax increment money, that's available. And then that can continue for as long as the county wants to do it. Not, you wouldn't get any more money into the fund after the 15 years. But that money can continue to rotate, revolve in and out to help other businesses. Then it would have to stay zoned as it is. But once all that was done, then it could be, the county could choose to rezone that area. But it would have to be based on the growth policy, as this gentleman pointed out very well. And it has to be, there has to be a basis for that decision more than just, we want it to go back. It has to be.
I'm not saying go back, I'm just go sideways.
Correct.
Go from industrial, we wanted industrial to bring this guy in. Okay, we got our sewer, we got it industrial. Oh, but now we'd rather bring this business in because it's more profitable. And now we're just gonna rezone it again to bring in that because
Yeah, I mean, most, the
there's
zone is
there is
pretty
a
wide
history
open.
with a couple of the people that own property. And Fubar Holdings is one of them. They're not industrial holding agents.
I think there's a specific list, Janet, that lists out.
That lists all the types of businesses that can
Yes,
be, and that's in the
because
regulation.
that's on that, I can't remember the right wording, but because it's on state highway, blah, 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 industrial piece, which is the same piece they bought into in the city of Three Forks and tried to get rezoned into something else. So, okay. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I didn't remember my question. It was about the money. So is the economic development people, are you guys putting in money to start the sewer and stuff? Because
I can't speak to MBAT, I'm not, they're a client, but I don't know if they're.
aren't they a government agency?
No.
Oh, they're a private agency? Oh, I thought it was the economic development people, so it's a whole different private company. Okay, so they're putting money in, and then what about the grant?
They're not putting it in.
Then where's the money coming from to build this
Yeah,
TED?
that is through the grant.
But if you don't get the grant,
No, but MBAC had money in their administrative budget to pay me, but they're facilitating these other funding sources to pay for the.
so like
they're not-
Centennial Wood across the road got economic money, development money from this, I believe it was from the state. This is something completely different. It's not the economic development to help build businesses in Montana.
I can answer that, Janet. Yes, Centennial Wood Products got the Whippers Grant through the Department of Commerce, and that was facilitated by MBAC. But it's totally separate. This was a good 5 or 6 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, totally separate.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this isn't the same kind of thing. So what is MBAC then? Why are they asking for this TED? Why are you guys
They're not
accepting it?
asking for this TED.
You guys
The
are?
county is.
The county is asking for it? So you're putting money into starting this, or so if you approve it today, then where is any funds gonna come to start it if you don't get the grant?
I don't understand your question.
Well, if you're
There's no
approving this,
grant.
I thought you were applying for a grant.
For the sewer. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
The grant was applied for was emergency services.
Emergency service.
Oh.
That was at the beginning of the meeting, yes.
Oh.
That was a separate, sorry, yeah.
So they're looking at bringing the tax revenue to support, to pay for the sewer.
Okay, so there's actually no money to fund this TED?
The TED's going to fund itself.
That's like itself.
Yeah, it's a self-licking ice cream cone.
With its own piggy bank.
It's a piggy
Not really.
So let me help you with the cast of characters here, okay? The county is, as Commissioner Ober just said, the county is responsible for designating this TED. There's no money required to establish it, except for my time and Nicole's time. So that, once it's established, the money that it can get, the county could apply for a grant, it could do a number of different things, but the funding source that it's mostly going to be using is the self-funding, where the taxes that are paid in that district fund the infrastructure.
So then the only reason that it got started was so the taxes could stay the same as they are right now. instead of going higher?
No, the taxes go higher because there's a new business there,
No, it still stays within its
but
own
it
group.
stays within the district.
Right.
But any taxes that come from housing that's built or any other businesses outside the district, that continues to go to all the different taxing jurisdictions. It's just in this
Sure.
boundary
Yes.
that any new taxes that accrue in that area stay in the district.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to understand why you would want the district if you're not gonna get the taxes, they're just gonna keep it themselves to pay for the infrastructure.
The county gets the taxes and puts it into the infrastructure. It's publicly owned infrastructure. The sewer system will be owned by the county or by the sewer and water, or sewer district,
Sewer district.
but not by Bridger Brewing.
Okay, thank you very much.
That helps.
What does MBEC get out of this?
Nothing?
They're fulfilling their mission as an economic development.
They do it for free?
They do it for free?
MBAC is, like Janet said, a regional economic development agency. They get their funding from a variety of sources. One is the federal government through the Economic Development Association, the other's through the state, which is the Certified Regional Development Corp. So, yeah, this is what they do. And every county has an economic development. Gallatin County has, yeah, they have one. Jefferson County has one. Every county in the state has an economic development assistance, like Broadwater County. We've teamed with Wheatland and Lewis and Clark County, and ours happens to be MBAC. It's done all over the state.
Can I ask a question? Does Broadwater County contribute any toward their cause?
We all have to. We are required by federal statutes or federal law to contribute. The feds won't contribute if we don't have skin in the game.
So is it
So-
a match kind of thing? I'm just curious.
Mhm.
Okay.
No, it's not a match. It's 1 mil. So that's what Lewis and Clark pays in, Marr County, Broadwater County, and then also the city of Townsend, White Sulphur Springs, Lincoln, Augusta. They also pay money in, again, to get that service back. Basically, what we pay in is about 1%
Okay.
of MBAC's operating budget. So it's not that much at all, but the feds require that we are an active participant.
Can I ask one more quick question? Would the county be able to establish its own revolving loan fund without
We
having
have one.
to- You do, okay.
Mhm. And it's been very successful.
Right,
Yeah.
Mountain County says not, just so you know. Would you be able to establish a loan for Bridger Brewing to help with the infrastructure if the TED did not exist?
It wouldn't be nearly enough.
It would be enough,
Not
okay.
even
that's-
close. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Any other public comment? So we will close the public hearing and go to the decision in the first reading of the provisional adoption of the ordinance to create
Mr. Chairman.
Broadwater County Weekly 10. Oh, Tim?
I'm sorry, I didn't get back from behind the post there quick. Just a real quick follow-up for clarification, Mr. Chairman. The resolution for the zoning passed by the commission is going forward, and that is fine, correct?
It's a
Because
resolution.
that's where I'm trying to get the
No, it's a
clarification.
resolution of intent.
Let me finish my question, because I understand you have that resolution that went through today, and then you have the preliminary or provisional or whatever word that is for the TED, which is temporary, which gets a 30-day comment period.
No.
Do they both fall under that
No,
30-day
excuse me,
comment
no.
period, or
The
just
30-day
one?
comment
I'm
period,
confused,
the 30-day comment period is a protest period for the zoning.
okay?
There is no required, you have to do 2 readings on the ordinance. This is a provisional adoption because you can't adopt it fully
Until the zoning is adopted.
Correct, but there's no protest period for the TED, only for the zoning.
Thank you. Got it mixed up, sorry, my bad.
I guess we will entertain a motion for the first reading provisional adoption of the ordinance to create the Broadwater County Wheatland TED Comprehensive Development Plan.
Would you like to do that?
Sure. I move to provisionally adopt on first reading the ordinance designating the Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development Area, creating the Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development District, and adopting the Broadwater County Wheatland Targeted Economic Development District Comprehensive Development Plan with a tax increment financing provision.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. That's all we have on the agenda. Is there anything else? We will adjourn at 12:01.